how we work, right, as individuals, as human beings, like where's our potential anyways, right? How do we exploit that? How do we harness the potential? And those have always been questions that I ask myself. As a leader, people under you, they always look at you. They they see all the details of you, and as human beings, we mimic. 20 years ago, we didn't talk about that as much, right? Because the role of the leader at that time was very different. But today we're talking about influence. Within 5 minutes, scientists know if someone will be able to influence the other person in front of them or not. And how they know is through.
Hi there. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. In this podcast, I interview successful business leaders and industry experts to help you grow and scale your business. In this episode, I interviewed Marylène Ayotte, a seasoned executive coach and certified consultant with over 25 years as an HR leader in global organizations. She empowers leaders and teams to excel aimed at pressure, blending neuroscience, neurocardiology, and positive psychology with the tools like HeartMath and biofeedback. Marylène builds real-time resilience, emotional agility, and coherent high-performance cultures. She's helping executives lead with the clarity, influence, and impact without a burnout. She's been serving CEOs and senior leaders across North America and Europe. Now, this was very interesting discussion. We talked about various topics around the leadership. She talks about how modern leadership is tackling today's challenges while unlocking team potential. She also talks about how leaders can boost productivity, ignite growth, and guide high-performing teams through smart development, targeted training, and masterful conflict resolution for sustainable success without a burnout. I hope you enjoy this discussion as much as I do. If you're finding a value out of these discussions, don't forget to send us your feedback and share with your friends. Our commitment is to make these discussions better every episode. So send us your feedback, please. Until next time, enjoy this discussion. Please welcome Marylène Ayotte. Welcome to Business Leadership Podcast. Today, our guest is Marylène Ayotte. I hope I pronounced it right. The Marylène, your last name?
Perfect. It's perfect. You're right.
You've been helping a lot of business leaders for many different areas. And leadership is so important, and some of those personal challenges I want to talk to you about. So I'm looking forward to learning from you, looking forward to discussion. Thank you so much for your time today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
You're welcome. So walk us through, how do you help our business leaders? What area do you cover, Marylène? If you just give us a little summary, of your the work you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll summarize it this way. I specialize really in helping leaders with emotional intelligence. Self-regulation would be also a key topic, executive presence, communication. So all the what we call the soft skills, right? I disagree when we say they're soft skills, because for me they're foundational to good to good leadership and influence especially. But yeah, so that's my big passion in life it's the self-development, right? It's the foundation to become a good and influential leader. And it's the human aspect of leadership that I specialize in.
Yeah, I know one thing as a building a business, one thing I learned early on in a business, Marylène, was that this personal development or professional development, we call it, is no different than a leadership. I used to set up a business goals, but what I realized, more I focus on learning and developing myself, the better in advance when I made in the goals. They're both related to each other. Like, the more you work on yourself, more you get better on yourself.
Mhm.
You get to move the goals much forward. So they're both tied together, right? And especially with what we just gone through recently with the economic times.
Yeah, and there's really, really great science, right, in the last decade, right? It's exploded when we're thinking about how we work, right, as individuals, as human beings, like where's our potential anyways, right? How do we exploit that? How do we harness the potential? And those have always been questions that I ask myself. And so in the last 30 years, I've been very passionate about that question. How do you harness? How do you perform at your best as an individual? And
Mhm.
what I've come to learn is that you need to know, you know, what are you made up of, right? And in the last 10 to 15 years, we're putting a lot of emphasis on the neurosciences and how that works. And emotional intelligence, when I wrote my master's degree, and I was focusing on mergers and acquisitions, but really, like the performance aspect of it, the managerial leadership performance within change. And it was all about emotional intelligence, but for me, it was emotional self-regulation.
Hmm.
Right? So how do you transmute? How do you become aware of what's happening within you emotionally, right? And how do you transfer that, or how do you transform? I never like the word control of emotions, but how do you become aware of that and transform, right? Transform the emotion. And how do you link, the heart and the mind? We always talk about the heart, in leadership, and the hands and act. But how do you integrate all these pieces that we have within us, and so that we can bring ourselves to a peak performance? And so what I do a lot with leaders these days is coherence, right? So how do you bring heart and mind together so that you can actually reach intentionally peak performance? And that would be coherence for me, right? And there's a whole science around heart coherence and brain, and the neurosciences, neurocardiology, because we have a small brain in our heart, and we have our brain. So how does this work together, right? So that we can really exploit the potential that we have, and that we manage that energy also that we have. Because oftentimes we talk about burnout. That's you know, these days, burning out, right? Losing that energy. Well, okay, how do you preserve it on a day-to-day basis? So that's also work that I do with leaders, is how do you preserve your energy? How do you regulate it, right? And how do you maintain it? And how do you keep yourself focused? And it's all through heart coherence that I do that, through science-based tools and techniques, that I teach. I have to teach it because it's new science. So I talk about neuroscience, positive psychology, neurocardiology, all of that. How did that work? How does that work together so that we can reach peak performance as individuals?
So there's so many topics you mentioned. They're very interesting. But but if somebody working on a business, definitely they have a goals what they want to get to, right? How do they do some sort of analysis or some sort of assessment? Hey, I cannot work on all of those things at the same time. But how do I prioritize? Where do I start from? And how do I start stacking up those skills as we go through? But they gotta start somewhere into the path of personal development, or whatever journey they want to go to. But how do they find out?
Yeah, so what I do, right, the journey that I like to take leaders through, right? Because for me it's from the inside out, right? It's like self-awareness first, right? So you need to be able to self-aware in order to be able to read your environment. That's the first thing. It's part of emotional intelligence. So it's always and you can become more self-aware as a leader in terms of, what are my strengths, and what are the things that I need to work on, to become that whole leader. And we can go through assessments, right? So different assessment. I work with Success Finder. Different consultants will use different assessments. There's that. You can use assessments, but I also bring them through what I call a vision exercise, so that they can really learn and become more aware of their essence, their unique essence as a leader. So I start with that. And then after that, I bring them into more of um, the self regulation aspect. I work on vision as well. How do we get to your vision? And what is that vision? Is it clear for you? Or clarity around the vision. So I do a lot of work on that because it starts with a vision. And oftentimes what happens is that, okay, so you're clear on your vision, but what are the barriers to get to your vision is oftentimes your own limitations, your own, fears, or your own. So I work a lot with mindset as well. So it's all like integrated, right? So that piece of emotional self-regulation, and I never talk about positive or negative emotions here. I always talk about using emotion as energy. So, because it's our fuel, right? So if you have no desire to get somewhere in life, and you're not you're not self-motivated, right? So where is that spot, that sweet spot for you? It could be purpose, it could be anything, right? That makes you want to act. And oftentimes we want to act, but what's also preventing you from acting, right? So we uncover a lot of stuff through coaching, through different techniques or different tools that I have in my toolbox as a consultant, so that we can, really create that path that's a clear one, right? With vision, but also clarity around, okay, so what are my barriers to attain that vision today? It could be, I have difficulty prioritizing. I can't
Hmm.
stay focused. It could be I have the imposter syndrome. Those are all things I'm seeing with leaders, that are barriers to their success. And it's oftentimes their own limitations, their own belief system. And sometimes it's just to, become aware of that and then just break the cycle, right? How do we break the cycle?
Got it. So two things you mentioned, very, very important. Let's talk about vision first. You mentioned the vision. So the goal there is that you define a vision and then you work backwards, whatever it's going to take us to get to the vision. Is
Yeah.
that what the objective is?
It's two things, right? It's like, where are you going, right? So you need to know where you want to go. And then I call it calibration of the vision. So is that your true vision? Is that really something that's conditioned from the outside world? That's really something that you want, right? And I always want people that you know, to get to a vision, you'll need work, you'll need to expend energy. So you want to make sure that the vision that you hold it within your heart. It's something that you want, that you desire. And so the desire piece is super important, right? So when I talk about clarity of vision is aligning people with their true desires in life and not being
Mm.
afraid of that. And then helping them trace a path towards what they really want, not something that's conditioned by society or by my parents or by my boss or by what people are telling me. It's really intrinsically, it's something that I want. And so we start with that. What would you love?
Mm-hmm.
What are your desires and what makes your heart sing? And we start with that. And then we describe that vision. And then once it's, described or calibrated, then I bring people through, steps, actions. Okay, so what are the actions to get there? What do you need to embody today? Does not necessarily get to your vision, but it's also embodying that blueprint today. What are the actions I can take today to get closer to that, you know,
Mm-hmm.
number two that I'm looking for, or me version number two, and then we start with that.
Very interesting. So other part you mentioned was emotional intelligence. This is my observation. I've seen that so many people, have a years experience in a business, but when it comes to decision making, doesn't matter what the decision is, when they make a decision, they get so emotional.
Yeah,
Um, what do you think that is? That just simply are managing a risk? Because I've seen a lot of people, especially when it comes to money or any of those items, when they have to make a decision, the emotions comes in a way, and it just blurries that the decision process or blurries that the end goal what they're trying to get to.
yeah.
Where do you think that happened? Is that part of them not being a um working on emotional intelligence piece, or is it something just a human nature?
You know what? It's human nature. We all have emotions. What we weren't taught in school is how to regulate our emotions. We need our emotions, right? We need our different parts of the brain to function optimally. Now, what happens is that emotion will cloud and bias, will create
Hmm.
bias and cloud. And that's why it's important to cultivate calmness and focus, because that's where clarity comes from. When you're hijacked by your emotions, let's say that you're in a state of fear or you're in a state of anxiety, then and the emotion is intense. You're being hijacked in a way, right? So you're in survival mode. We have like two brains, right? We have our smart brain and then we have our more limbic brain. Um, when we're operating from a place of fear, we're operating from our lower brains, right? So we're more in reaction. We're not going to be responding, and scientifically, it's been proven that you're not fully engaging your whole intelligence when you're hijacked by anxiety, let's say, or by fear. And so those are not the optimal decisions that you can take in that moment. So it's really important, as a leader to cultivate that calmness so that you can We call it flow. You can call it flow. You call it the zone within yourself so that you can operate from a place of calm, focus, and then the download when you're in that place is very different. The ideas are very different in a calm place versus in a place of fear, right? Where
Hmm.
your mind is going, right, at 100 miles an hour. And because of that, maybe you're not seeing the opportunities. So, so when we talk about decisions, right, the more coherent you are, the better decisions you'll be be able to make as a leader in in real time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen that business leaders, especially when it comes to technology, it's because they're not expert on the technology. They're expert on the business side of things, many other areas, whatever the industry is, right?
Yeah.
When they're making decision, which is they're not expert at, definitely there has to be some sort of risk involved. There has to be some sort of unknown territory that they're getting in. They're trying to make a decision in. And,
Yeah.
and that's when I see the emotions get so high because they're just not expert on that and they need to make a decision on that. And there's a lot of um, uh, consequences if they made a bad decision
Yep.
because that's but the whole company depends on it, right? So I see a lot of emotions goes high and I see a lot of people trying to control it, some struggling with it. I see that all the time.
Yeah.
It's simply just trying to help them out, but I think it just has to come within. They have to figure out how to deal with those territories. So if we can walk these business leaders who always dealing with the fear, what can they do to
Right.
control
So
the emotion.
there's so many different tools out there when we're talking about emotional self-regulation. I mean, we know today meditation is like mindfulness, meditation, right? We're bringing this into organizations now so that we can, reduce the stress that, there's so much, there's like worldwide, the statistics when it comes to burnout is it's always been there. But since the pandemic, it's increased a lot, right? And especially in the world that we live in right now, um, it's tools. So I offer coherence, right? So that's a tool. Some people respond really well to those tools because they're science based. So,
Mm.
I can explain it scientifically why it works. They're simple, practical. You use them on a day to day basis and throughout the day to keep yourself coherent. They're tools. Meditation, mindfulness. There's so many different podcasts out there, right? And it really depends on what are you drawn to? Joe Dispenza is a huge I'm a huge fan of Joe Dispenza. He explains it really well, the science. HeartMath, I'm certified HeartMath trainer. They explain it real well. They've been doing it for the past 30 years. How do you help people regulate those emotions in real time? It could be just breathing, learning how to breathe. It, you know, and I would say it comes down to knowing yourself, right? The signals. When are you starting to get overly anxious? And some people don't know when they're not in touch with the emotional aspect of themselves. And so they don't know. But I think it really starts with awareness. What's happening inside of you? When are you calm? Where are the events that bring this calmness to you? When do you get excited or anxious? What triggers it? So that I'd say the foundation is self-awareness about how are you feeling right now? And then what works to come outside, how do you when you realize that you're in a place of anxiety, then what are your tools? What do you use? You know, I often ask people or leaders, what do you use today? Oftentimes, a lot of people don't, a lot of leaders don't have tools. I don't know. I don't know what I use. I don't use anything. I just react, right? But I'm just helping them, giving them tools to learn how to respond.
Very
Um,
interesting. Yeah,
because
and I think a tool works differently for different people, I guess, right? One tool's not gonna work for everybody. What works for you, it may not work for somebody else.
I think it's not about working. Like for instance, there are tools that are really based in science. I mean, you and I are built, human beings. One thing we have in common, we have emotions, we have a brain, we have a heart, and it functions the same way for you and I.
Mm.
Now, it is more a preference, right? Some people will say, well, you know what? I'm not into breathing. I'm not okay. Well, It's like saying, I want to lose weight, but I want to eat chocolate, and we know that that's not going to work, right? I'm going to eat pastries all day and I'm hoping that well, we do have a nervous system and we need to know how to calm it down. And the first thing, and if you think of martial arts or any yoga or breathing has been taught for forever in different disciplines, right? Because why? Because it works. Now, there's different types of breathing, uh, and depending on the type that you use, and has different effects, right, on the nervous system. So, someone who tells me, "Well, I don't want to breathe," then I will say, "Well, I can't do anything for you," because it starts with that.
You're breathing anyway.
Yeah,
Why don't you breathe with?
your breath is with you anyway,
Yeah.
right? So it's just creating habits. The habit is super important, right? I always start really with small, small habits, and then we build. We build, and then eventually, it takes about 63 days, right, to build a really strong habit. Scientifically, it's 69 weeks, and then people, when they've built the habit, they don't let it go. They will never let it go.
Yeah, what worked for me over the years, Marlon, is I'm in a very regular jogger. I go for a run, right? So for long runs, right? So when I come back, everything's normal, So I don't know, is running helping me, or is breathing when I'm breathing faster when I'm helping? So I don't know, is it breathing or running helping me? But one of those things works for me.
Well, for sure. Running is great. And when you run, you are breathing deeply. You don't have a
Yeah,
choice. If you don't breathe deeply, what? You get
yeah.
excited, right?
You don't
So
going anywhere.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, absolutely. And then there's the breathing, right? But it's the first step, right? To calm your nervous system down, because sometimes you'll breathe, but yet you're still agitating. So the breath will calm the nervous system down, but then you want to bring yourself into coherence, right? You want to get yourself out of survival and you want to bring yourself into creation.
Hmm.
Because it's out of the creative mind that you'll find the right solutions, that you'll make the right decisions, that you'll be in touch with the voice of intuition, if you want to call it that way, or your internal guidance, right? Sometimes we have different voices. So there's the voice of the rational mind, and then there's the voice of, I would call it the intuition. It's the voice, it's a still small voice. It's a small that you don't hear when you're overly excited. So that's why calmness is important, bringing calm to your nervous system so that you can hear that voice and can be guided oftentimes.
Yeah.
So learning how to distinguish those voices is really through, first you breathe, and then after that you use your imagination. It's how you use your imagination.
Yeah.
The way of using, we have this amazing faculty called imagination, but we use it
Mm.
not oftentimes to scare ourselves instead of so there's science behind that. How do you use it and what impact it has on your biology? Um,
So it's a skill to tap into that, because I know only time I tap into that, as you made a good point, that I make most of my decision when I'm jogging, up to the very end of the jogging. Not the early end, but when I'm almost finished, like a 10, 15 kilometers. That's when I'm making a lot of decisions, and that's a lot of creativity. What I'm gonna do next to move business forward. What I'm gonna do this. So well, I'm listening to your points, and now I realize that most creativity and the decision making and whatever I need to do for the rest of the day, it comes from the very end of running, not the early on or the middle of the running.
yes,
So
because you've created a biochemistry, right?
that,
Because running brings you to, I don't know for you what it brings, but of course there's um, different hormones that are released, different biochemistry in the body, and and it brings you probably, I don't know for you, what is jogging? What's the state that jogging brings you into for you? What is
so
it?
business creativity. What do I need to create? I create content, I create ideas, I create.
The feeling in your body. When you run, what happens there for you? When you start running and towards the end, more like what are you feeling? What are you feeling within you? Is it peace? Is it calmness? Is it what is
Very quiet, very quiet.
quiet?
I can go for jog without even looking at anything. Just
And
no noise.
and at the beginning, how are you feeling? At the beginning of your jog,
It's not calm. Is I'm still trying to figure out. You're still thinking about what happened during the day, but if you go a few kilometers and if you half an hour later, you're not
yeah,
thinking about the day. Tap into something that where you want to be.
exactly. So for you, jogging brings you into the moment, probably the present moment, right? Where you're kind of like, and there's like the whole release of endorphins, of everything that's happening in the body, and your state is different as well. Your emotional state is probably very different. And emotions have an impact on our biochemistry. And so, why at the end of the jog, you're feeling more creative? You've changed your state. And so, and that state allows you to access creativity. It's a state, right? And the state that, or the emotion that you're living in the moment creates a certain biochemistry in your body that opens up, right? That creative aspect. Whereas if you're in more of anxiety or, that state, you'll produce certain biochemistry in the body with that state, but you'll have different ideas related to the state of anxiety. So ideas producing more anxiety. Whereas, when you have a different state, if you feel peace, if you feel gratitude, that's why gratitude is such a powerful state to
Mm-hmm.
be in, is that it creates a different biochemistry in the body. Right. And so, and because of that, then you have a different indirect channel to your creativity. And that's called, uh, in scientific terms, you are either inhibited or because of your emotions, or you're not, right? So
Mm-hmm. So we use running as one of the example, but looks like there's so many different ways you can tap into that state and work on yourself and get to that, right?
yeah, absolutely. And so for me, um, it's creating that state at will, right? So it's not chance. So it's like you create it, you're in control of your vehicle, and you have the tools and you have the techniques. Exercise is one of them, right? So running could do that. Absolutely. For people who can't run, what are the tools for them? So in coaching, we discover that I always offer coherence because they're like direct tools and you can use throughout the day. And they really bring that aspect of connecting the heart and the mind together so that you can tap into your tap into peak performance. And it's a signal also. It's a specific signal that you can create within your body. It's zero point 0.1 hertz frequency that you can create at will, you as
Mm.
a human being. So we have more control that we think.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so business leaders get, we all work on it, definitely is, you got to grow and you got to work on it and you get better. But other side of that is, Marlene, is that what have we gone through? We work in a decentralized environment. You and I talking digitally right now, and a lot of companies have, the employees working from home as well. They're working remotely. You don't connect with the people, but they have their own challenges that they're up against, whether it's physical, spiritual, mentally, or whatever the challenges they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Leaders not only they have to learn this and get better at it and work on themselves, they also have to help their teams. So what can they do to help their teams to even start working in this area and get better at whatever they're doing, and maybe tap into what they're trying to at the state they want to tap in.
Yeah, I think, like for leaders, I think if they work on themselves first is always a priority, right? Work on yourself, you will influence. As a leader, people under you, they always look at you. They they see all the details of you, and as human beings, we mimic. We do want to mimic, right? So we
Hmm.
do mimic our leaders. So just that, right? So if a leader works on themselves and they're open about it as well, right? Hey, I'm doing this, and they're being vulnerable. If that portion of vulnerability, I think, is super important. And Brene Brown talks about that vulnerability in leadership. I think just being vulnerable as a leader, right? Saying, hey, I'm not perfect. I don't have it all. However, those are the tools that I'm using right now. I'm working on myself. I'm working on this. I'm working on that. When I was working at Pepsi, actually, that was a huge thing, people development, people working on themselves so that they can show up better at work. So if a leader works on themselves, already, I think that's 50%, right?
Hmm.
And then after that, it's having those discussions because I think every single person on the team is different. So the coaching aspect, right? We talk about coaching today. Integrating coaching in your leadership, I think is super important. In 2012, coaching was always something that we were talking about at Pepsi,
Hmm.
helping leaders integrate the leader coach mindset. right? So sitting down with your employee and understanding, asking questions, being curious, open-ended questions to understand where they're at, on their journey. And from there, if you come from a place of understanding, then it's easier for you as a leader to help the person navigate what it is that they're, like get the challenges and stuff and the right tools for them. Because each member of the team is different.
Yeah, so these are complex conversation and very very heavy conversations. So what can business leader help teams with, so they can discover what they need help with, because that's the biggest challenge is they don't know mostly what area they need help with, right? So they haven't worked on it. So what can we do? What kind of questions can you ask? So they can discover themselves. I need help in this area.
Yeah, I think, right now, and what I'm seeing in the context is that as a leader, you're not a psychologist, right? So there's a fine line
Yep.
between what you can do and you can't do as a leader. I think it's finding resources really, like internally, what does the organization offer for employees who are going through rough patches, right? There's the employee assistance programs, that a leader can refer someone to. I think, the trap is when you're trying to um, be or play a role that you shouldn't be playing as a leader.
Yeah, and you're not expert at that.
Yeah, you're not an expert. So I think as a leader, is to understand different expertise, right? The resources around that can help people navigate through their if we're talking about business and we're talking about business objectives and I need to reach my objectives and those are more like what a leader needs to do is like, okay, does your employee need training, onboarding, like being able to, that is something that, but when it comes to um, more personal issues, you know? It's to be there to listen, right? And to open your heart and be compassionate and be empathetic, yes, but not try to bring the burden on your shoulders and think that you're the one responsible for their well-being, right? So that's where coaching comes into place. It's like being curious and letting the person talk and letting the person find their own tools through coaching, through open-ended
Got it.
coaching.
Got it.
There's different ways to do it.
So do you see this area where business leaders bring you in, and do you help out business leaders in this area because that's not what they're
Yeah.
expert in?
Yeah, absolutely. So that dimension of leader coach, how can you be a more intentional leader? So yeah, I train leaders on that. How do you become more of a coach? How do you integrate coaching in your leadership? How like different feedback models, that's more consulting. Right? So different, what works in terms of communication, in terms of how do you integrate the coaching aspect into your leadership? And then there's different tools for that as well.
Very interesting. There's so much to learn from you, Marlene. How do you get into you came from a HR background. How do you get into this? If you can talk about your journey a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So this quest on human potential, right? So how it's a very young age, 17, 18, I was very drawn to self-development. So that's always been kind of like a passion of mine that I would do outside of work. But I've always been very, very I love people. I love human beings. So I've always wanted to work with humans, which has brought me to study HR. And that's how I started, right? I started in HR role, and then I was a leader in big corporations as a HR leader at Pepsi. But while I had my kids later in life, but when while I was developing my career in HR, I was also very interested in emotions because as a young kid, I had anxiety. I had a performance anxiety. I was performing as a pianist and I was in those competitions. And at home, I would, did, my piece perfectly, but then in front of others, then I would block. Right? It would drive me insane. And I needed an answer for that. I, I wanted to understand what caused the anxiety and I wanted to regulate it in the moment. So I've been at it for a very long time, right? So I studied homeopathy for 4 years, during the weekends for 4 years. My thesis when I did my master's was all about regulation of emotions because in change, what I noticed is that leaders would, they would either not adhere to the change and because of fear, because of uncertainty. And so there I was like, okay, there it is, again, emotions, right? It's not,
Hmm.
it's limiting. So how do we bring people, we transition people out of fear, right, into more creativity. So it started at a very early age and I studied different disciplines to understand how this body works of ours through homeopathy, through, non-traditional stuff, really
Hmm.
and books and all that. And then I did when I left Pepsi, it was in 2019, I knew that I wanted to focus more on coaching. They At Pepsi, I didn't know coaching was a profession. Like I didn't know that I could do that professionally. It's really when I left Pepsi that I realized that there's a whole industry. And I'm like, okay, this is really what I want to do. And got some certifications, in California with Mary Morrissey around vision, and then the science around that, and then coherence with HeartMath. And I'm using a lot of these tools now and then I joined and I collaborated with, I'm a huge collaborator with Humans Culture and Performance here in Quebec. And I've put in place some programs, leader coach programs for them, leading intentionally as well. So there's a whole bunch of different training programs I also give in collaboration with Humans. So there's, but it's all um, programs to help leaders just tap more into of their potential and really lead from the heart. For me, it's really comes from there.
Is it one-on-one coaching you do, or is it webinars, or they do as a public speaking, or how do you?
Yeah, I do one-on-ones. So I do personalized coachings, one-on-ones. I do group coaching. I do webinars. I do all of that. Yeah.
Very interesting. These are the areas, if I look at my colleague, all business leaders, we came from some technical background and we built the companies, right? So we're not expert in this area. So this is where a lot of, blind spots come in, right? We're not expert in this. So that's where we need a coaches and people like you to come and help us see those blind spots and help people as well. So not only business leaders can, get better, also they can help the teams to get better in this area as well, right? So I think that's where we need your help in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, like 20 years ago, we didn't talk about that as much, right? Because the role of the leader at that time was very different. But today we're talking about influence. We're talking about
Hmm.
influencing, we're talking about collaboration, and we know that influence, right, through scientific studies, like influence comes from different studies that were conducted in within 5 minutes. Scientists know if someone will be able to influence the other person in front of them or not. And how they know is through nonverbal communication. And if
Mm.
you think about nonverbal communication, well, what is that, right? It's your presence, it's how you speak, but it's your tone of voice, it's how you look at people in the eyes or not. It's all your nonverbal sends out a message, but what creates the presence is the emotion. It's what you're thinking internally, right? So it's self-regulation is there in influence. The more you're able to regulate and come into a place of confidence, you're sending different signals out there, and people, our nervous systems, were able to cap that, and we make a decision based on that. So, and scientists were able to show it's not what someone says, it's the
How
whole
you say, yeah, the whole.
person.
Well, how many times we make a decision when we're hiring people? Because when you're recruiting people in first couple of minutes, instead of listening to the full interview, we go through interview, we still talk to the person, but decisions made in the first couple of minutes.
Yeah.
It's based on what you just mentioned that just the energy we sensing and all the vibes and all that stuff we sense before that.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing is that's measurable. That field that we're broadcasting is measurable.
Or so we can measure it.
Yes. Yes.
Because
Part
if we can measure it, we can do it over and over the same thing.
Of course, it's called coherence. It's what you emit. We're very much electric and electromagnetic as human
Hmm.
beings. Like radio waves, we emit. Emotions are frequencies. We emit emotion, and people can feel it. They can sense it. When you walk a room and you can feel the room around you. That's what your nervous system. attunes to it, and
So how would you measure that, Marylène? How would you measure that?
they usually they measure it through it comes from the heart, actually. The electromagnetic field, it comes from it's so the heart pumps, it's electric, but within that electricity, there's a electromagnetic field that's measurable today. So you can measure the electricity, but you can, and it's HeartMath, and different scientists, they measure it with magnometers. And so there's a specific, like different tools, right, that they can use to measure it. And it's kind of like a torus that you have around you, and within that, your emotions. And your emotions are measurable with frequencies. Every single emotion is kind of like a fingerprint. It's a frequency, it's a vibration. And so you emit that, and depending on people's nervous systems and their sensitivity, can feel it. And you've probably felt it yourself, and,
All
we
the time, we just, it's an energy you feel, or a vibe you feel, whatever you want to call it, right?
exactly. And now today, the beauty about science today is that there's so many things happening right now that they can measure the what we felt was really intangible, right? And taboo emotions and all that. And I've been at it for the last 30 years, but today it's amazing because we now have tools, spectral analysis, magnometers, all sorts of things, that we can measure these things from, and makes it less tangible. So when I teach, I always teach so that people can comprehend the science.
Yeah.
Then we practice the techniques. Then you can live the techniques, right? So I,
Very
I
true.
go at it in different ways. So
Or
logically,
yeah,
then
yeah.
through science, and then with the experience of the techniques and the different tools that I teach.
Very interesting. There's so much to learn from you. I know we had a short time, so but I
But
wanted to understand, but so much, business leaders who are watching or listening to us, I'll definitely recommend into have a conversation with you. I learned so much from our discussion, Marylène, and I'm sure whoever reaches out to you, they're gonna learn a lot as well. So this is the area we're not expert at, so that's where we need expert like you to reach out and connect and learn from. Where can people find you, Marylène, if they want to connect with you?
they can find me. I'm on LinkedIn, right? So Marylène Ayotte, and I can send you my coordinates. I have a website, Marylène at Ignite Human Potential
Yeah,
.coach.
sure.
Are ways that I can be reached.
I will put a link both of those below this video as well. People can click a button and they can just reach out to you,
Yeah.
for conversation. But I will strongly recommend to people to watch this conversation, listen, connect with you and see where the conversation can take you.
Yeah. Well, hey, thank you, Gurmeet. Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure spending this time with you.
Right.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer any questions, anyways, if people have.
Perfect.
And yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for spending time with me and educating us. I learned so much from you. Thank you so much for time, Marla.
Thank you, Gurmeet.
Thank you.
Okay.